dark, misty world? A place where there were no colors and everything was black and gray. Such a life would certainly be a great torment for human beings. But the world is actually very colorful. Blessings that Allah has created for human beings, and His artistry of color in the world. Allah's artistry in color. All parts of the world have been created in harmony and decorated with beautiful flowers. Green forests, blue lakes, majestic mountains, and boundless oceans.
The area of the brain we are referring to is called the cerebral cortex, and it's the smart brain that you're using right now to do most of the listening, looking, and learning. The left hemisphere is generally very good at receiving information, being organised, doing things logically, following instructions, abstract thinking, attending to detail, and enjoying language, words, and wordplay. Whereas the right hemisphere is generally very good with expression, spatial awareness, seeing the big picture, intuition, creative thinking, problem solving, and picking up emotional signals. The way that the left and right hemispheres of the brain perceive information from the senses is therefore subtly different. For instance, with vision, the left will look for the detail and the right will look at the big picture. With communication, the left is mainly verbal, while the right favours non-verbal. In movement, the left hemisphere is strong on planning, technique, structured moves, while the right favours an intuitive and expressive flow of movement. And with hearing, the left favours listening to specific notes, lyrics, speech, while the right favours rhythm, dialect, and intention. Now let's have a go at these quick activities to discover your dominant hemisphere. Quickly glance at the image on the screen. What was the first thing you noticed? That it was made up of the letter D's, or that it looked like the letter L? If you first saw the D's, then that's the left brain looking at the detail. If you saw the letter L, that's the right brain looking at the big picture. Take a look at these words and colours. Quickly pick out the word green. Now, have you picked out the word spelt green or the word written in green? If you first found the word spelt green, that's your left brain looking for the detail. If you first identified a word written in green, that's the right brain. Hopefully, your brain will eventually show you both the detail and the big picture as the two hemispheres share information. But it's the first aspect you are drawn to, the detail or the whole, that can give you clues as to which hemisphere is most likely your dominant.
Hi everyone, welcome to a really brief presentation on brain parts and functions. So let's look at the first area, the cerebrum. It's the largest part of the brain and it controls most of the body's voluntary functions. It's covered by this thing called the cerebral cortex and it can be broken down into things called lobes. The first lobe we'll look at is the frontal lobe, located at the front of the brain. It's primarily responsible for things like language, judgment and decision making. So really the higher executive mental function, if you will. The next lobe is the parietal lobe. And it really helps interpretation of senses of smell, touch and taste. The next lobe, the occipital lobe, is at the back of the brain and it really maintains the visual processing center or the visual cortex for eyesight. The final lobe is the temporal lobe, and the temporal lobe contains the auditory cortex for hearing, but it also contains the hippocampus, which helps with long-term memory formation, and a word I can never pronounce correctly, the amygdala, which controls our anxiety levels, and that amygdala probably fires when I try and pronounce it. So let's split the brain in half so we can look at some components on the inside. So swing it over. The corpus callosum connects the left and right hemispheres. It sits under the cortex and helps with the communication between the two. The cerebellum is kind of like a separate structure. It controls balance, posture and coordination of skeletal muscles sitting at the base there. The medulla oblongata, it deals with involuntary functions such as breathing, heart rate and blood pressure, and the pons helps with breathing also and some eyesight control. The thalamus, it really serves as the operator, sending messages to other parts of the brain, and the hypothalamus, sitting below that, it's responsible for things like aggression, fear, sexual behaviour, in part anyway, and helps regulate temperature and water, appetite and thirst. Pituitary gland secretes hormones, and the brainstem finally helps transmit these messages to organs from the brain. So those last components are really the primitive, non-voluntary kind of areas of the brain, the lizard-like brain, if you will. So let me just take a breather and go over a little quick summary here if I can. The cerebrum, comprised of the lobes, the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe and the temporal lobe. So let me split in the middle as well and then fling this over so we can have a look. The corpus callosum, the cerebellum, the medulla oblongata, the pons, the thalamus and the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland and the brainstem. Wow, okay, well, thank you for watching the presentation. As I promised, very rude and crude brain parts and functions presentation. Hope you enjoyed.
Read the sentence, please.
Dad has a house. What is a green socks? What is a yellow socks? What is a blue socks? What is a purple socks? What is black color, bad. Red color, green color, pink color, blue color, black color, green color, banana. Blue color, purple color, black color, red color, yes.
What is it like to be colorblind? Does colorblind mean you can't see any colors at all? Can you only see black and white?
You tell somebody that doesn't know anything about it, and they think, well, there's colors that you don't see. It's not like you're blind. It's just I get pretty much everything mixed up. Like I get blue and purple confused, I get red and green, green and brown, red and brown, orange and green, yellow and green, pink and blue, like all of those, I can see something and think it's, something else. I just don't think about color, I think, the way people look at something, and one of the first things they think about is what color it is, anything. And I don't ever think about it. I think about everything else, I just don't think about that. Well, if I look at that tree, I think about the shape, the texture of it. If your brain kind of comes up with a list of things that sort of relate to what that is, color is not one of them. I don't even think about what color it is.
How did you find out you were colorblind?
I remember hearing the story about how I was in kindergarten and the teachers called my parents in because of the colors I was using in my artwork. The colors were just wrong, like maybe the sky purple and the people were green and the grass was orange, and somebody was just like, oh, maybe he's colorblind. I remember taking the test. You look at the circle and there's dots and they ask you what number you see.
Have you ever thought something was one color and it turned out to be another?
That does happen every once in a while. There'll be something that I either own or come across on a regular basis that I thought was one color and it's just not.
Does someone help you get dressed in the morning?
I think that's more of an issue when you're like putting together an outfit that has to be coordinated, and I just don't do that. I just wear things that kind of go together with everything. It's like jeans and blue shirts, black shirts.
What's your job?
Well, it's just kind of funny because I work with photographs all day. There have been situations at work where, because I work on websites and things to do with design, graphics, and things like that. It's like, can you make that a little more green? I'll open up the color picker in Photoshop and I'll get them to point. Like, why don't you can pick exactly what you want. Let them do it. And there's websites you can go to that have pre-created color schemes, colors that look okay together.
Is it hard to be colorblind?
It would be easier to not be colorblind. It kind of would be easier if I could see it the way everyone else sees it, because then I would kind of we're all on the same page. You're kind of like on a slightly different page if you're colorblind. In the realm of disability, it's pretty minor. It's not something I think about all the time. Because, it's really not that big a deal.